without any lengthy introductions or ado, if you will, let me welcome and introduce very briefly our panelists that will actually speak on the second panel. It's Kai Arne Springorum, CEO of HE Consulting and also a member of the Energy Efficiency Expert Team at the Confederation of Industry of the Czech Republic. Hello. Petr Řeháček of Advisory Services at EY Czechia. And last but not least, David Šafář, Head of Grid Management and Strategic Projects at E.ON Distribuce. Gentlemen, let's not waste time. Kai, the floor is yours, and I'm very much looking forward to your presentation. By the way, just so you know, and a short introduction to a lengthier one that will Kai present, he is also a part of Extinction Rebellion. What is that? Well, Kai will tell you.
Good afternoon. I'm very pleased that you at least stayed. There were a few more people. Can you hear me all right? Is the mic on? I guess it is.
The mic is on, but for whatever reason it's not working that well. We can try this.
Okay.
I hope.
It's kind of... And we need that presentation of mine. Yeah, this works really well now.
You can change it.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay. Now I'll get your presentation.
So in the bio you had on the papers you got, it omitted one thing, and it's because I didn't submit it. But really what I'd like to talk about is Extinction Rebellion. I'm going to talk a little bit also about what I'm doing professionally, but that was introduced, and you can also look it up on the web. Here we go. That's me. I'm a father of 4 children. I have a university studies in Germany and London in hydrogeology, so I know something about the planet. I got an MBA from a Paris Collège des Ingénieurs. I am an energy efficient consultant for Škoda Auto, one of the best, if not the best reference in the Czech Republic. And I'm a member of the Industry Federation, and I'm on a strict confrontational course with the industry of the Czech Republic. It all has changed actually 9 months ago when I joined Extinction Rebellion. This is me 3 weeks ago when I did my first criminal offense in the Czech Republic. I sprayed the building of the Ministry of Regional Development with green paint. I sprayed our logo. And the year 2025, which is right on the topic, as I just seen that most of you don't believe we can manage 2050. My life is turning around Extinction Rebellion right now, and there's some good reasons for it. This is our planet. It's our atmosphere. It's the only planet we know where we can exist. There's no alternative. Even if we found one, it would be too far away. That's our home. That's all we have. That's really the state of our planet. That's a picture taken a few years ago in California. Our planet is on fire and we're playing golf. We're pretending business as usual will give us the solutions. It will not. Okay. So, before I go there, let me go back a little bit. I'm currently in conversations with the Škoda Auto management about scaling up our program. We've been saving them in the last few years about 2 million euros per year on energy, which is not a lot, given that they spend about 90 million euros every year on energy. But having worked for that company for 5 years, I now see that there's a potential for 20-25% savings without major investments, something like a 3-year payback. It's just people don't believe it, but I see it. It's in the human behavior. So my company is Human Element Consulting. We focus on the human side of energy efficiency. While we live in a world which usually focuses on the technology sides of everything, because we're obsessed with technology, and technology has brought us immense, fantastic advances, but it's also brought us to the edge of collapse. Okay, let me be very clear about that. We all including myself, are part of an economic system which is in the process of self-destructing itself, self-destroying itself. Okay? Now, if you look at physics, it'll be very clear. No, we cannot go on like that. And if the United Nations and the IPCC say we have 12 years and we need fast, unprecedented, and never seen changes, far-reaching changes, and they said that a year ago, and they said we have 2 years to start doing that, and I don't see any fast, unprecedented or far-reaching changes. We are failing on a large, major global scale. And we need to wake up, okay? So I joined the Extinction Rebellion when I saw that people are actually in action. So what we do, we focus on interrupting business as usual. We behave as citizens in the world in a way which is not expected, which is not conform. We block roads, we have all age groups, and we don't play along. And we don't do that for a day, we do that for several days on end, until the system actually starts realizing, you know, this is really doing damage. It's the same theory like strikes. We had strikes for centuries, and the first day the business manager says, oh, let them strike. You know, I've got my business. They'll change their mind in a few days. But if they don't change the mind, after a week, the financial director comes, this is really starting to hurt us, boss. You know, so that's how you actually achieve change. We don't bring solutions. The problem is too complex for a group of citizens to come with solutions. We are the alarmists. We are here to wake up. If there's a fire, you need someone to scream, there's a fire. You don't ask them the question, but is it a mechanical fire, or was it electrical short circuit, or was it a human being who started it? You know, how can we extinguish it? That's not the question. You first need to scream, there's a fire. So we're all about mass civil disobedience. It's worked in the past, it's worked with Gandhi, it's worked with Martin Luther King, and it's going to work again this time too. That's what gives me hope. Because business as usual will not get us to even 2050. But whenever there's a war breaks out, people immediately shift. And they won't go to their weekend house on the weekend, but they will help you build the barricades. That's the kind of mind shift we need to achieve. You know. And why would we do that? Not to wreck business, of course. We depend on working and making a living, but in order to transform business. You know. Stop producing things which are not helping us solve the crisis. Start producing things which are part of the solution. I had a conversation last week with one of the senior members of the team of Severská Energetika, and it's really tough for the fossil fuel industry. They know the change is coming, and they can't quite imagine how they can manage. But actually, we need those companies and their know-how for that transformation. We need to build photovoltaics on a massive scale. We need to build wind power on a massive scale, fast, soon. This is why I personally believe nuclear is not an option. You know, yes, let's run Temelín as long as we can. I'm pretty sure actually that the Germans will change their mind in the next 3 years and say we need to run them a little bit longer, because CO2 is actually worse than managing the risk of nuclear energy. Yeah, so let's go on. Yeah, this is because we only had 10 minutes and I'm probably already getting close. I invite you all to join the rebellion. We need you all, we really do. Yes, we are radical, but we're not all that radical. We have all sorts of different roles for everyone. Everyone is supposed to find a role in it. And I brought some flyers, and we have our big rebellion starting on the 7th of October globally in more than 60 cities. We will stop blockade cities. In Prague we will join on Friday the 11th, and then on Saturday the 12th with a big festival. We have more than 100 people now who are arrestable in the Czech Republic. We about double our numbers every 2 months now. And globally there is supposed to be about 1 million people involved, 11 months after its founding, in 60 countries, over 600 local groups. Join, be part of the solution, I actually even brought forms, so you can actually join right today and here. Thank you very much. Looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Kai. So, radical take on the subject matter, if you will. Now, Petr Žáček of EY. I expect a similarly radical take on the subject matter from the corporate perspective.
Hello, it's a delight being here. I will not be so radical, I'm afraid. I would like to be, but we live in the Czech Republic where radicalism is not popular, so at least now. Can you hear me when I speak like that? No. No. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Can I have my presentation, please?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thinking about joining the rebellion and forgetting my job.
Well, my task is to talk about regulation and business. These things go together, but in a very, very tiny edge. Because if I should answer a question, what the regulation should be to help the business, well, the answer is very simple. It should be simple, it should be straightforward, stable, and let the business do the margins and do the profit. That's actually what everyone wants and nothing more. But can the policies also motivate the business to do a change that Arne was talking about, that we kind of need to do in 10 or 30 years before we do the interstellar thing that the music reminded me of? Well, let's take a look at the light bulb, because 10 years ago we used to have 100-watt light bulbs that were based on the technology 150 years back into the Edison times. We almost, or at least our president at the time, chose the Czechoslovak way for that, and I would be very disappointed now if we did so, because if we take a look at the facts, it was kind of not technologically neutral, which I would like to express is one of the important things in regulation, and Mr. Horáček was talking about it. But the effect now is that nobody, I think, is complaining about LED light bulbs. It costs the same, it lasts 20 times as much, and for example, if you are buying a car, you kind of don't want to have the halogen lights, and you rather have the LED light. And also you don't need to have that fancy one, you can have even cheaper one. And €1 that lasts 20 years, I think it's a good bargain. The other things that come with regulation in energy sector, except for the last one, but it's my favorite affair in the Czech media discussion. Except for the light bulbs, we had GDPR, we had the vacuum cleaners. I think that we don't have to talk about it that long, but looking back at these regulations, I can say with most certainty that all of them paid out in its side effects by now. The GDPR is much more complicated, but if you take a look at what Facebook says now, we need to have a similar regulation in the United States, because we are kind of out of the ideas what to do with the personal data. Back to the energy. The first panelist talked about United Kingdom and its way down to zero with the coal. I think in the next 2 years we can already see that every second day in the United Kingdom, I think, is without coal. In the German power sector, we already can see that more than 30% of electricity is made with renewables. Last week, in the I know, how was it called, the storm. There was 50 gigawatts of wind generating power, which is kind of like 5 times of the Czech transmission and of the Czech consumption need. Nuclear, as Arne said, is good. Let's use it. It's cheap because the power plants are demortized. We don't need to invest capex. As the Britain example and the Finland and Japan shows, if we invest now into the technology that is also kind of 30 years old, it will cost so much that we will probably need to shut it anyway if, during the time of construction. But what is the real market data? You can see that the go-to-market time of investment into coal and natural gas is kind of high above the average RES installation. And what you can see in Spain, for example, there have been so many new connections to the transmission systems from the renewable sources that the transmission operator and the distribution operators must now stop connecting those appliances. So, as the speakers said, renewables are cheap. That's a fact. Nuclear is very, very expensive, and the reality is that if you build nuclear, it takes 30 years. If you build renewables, it takes 2 or 3 years. These are the European targets. This is what Czech Republic proposed. You can see that we already have 15% of renewable energy. What we proposed was 20 by 2030. If you take a look at the 4%, that's what you can do without doing literally nothing. If we just let the market grow, it will probably reach more than 20%. EU is now demanding 23. We had proposals and technical and economical studies that say we can do 24 to 28 just fine. And if you take a look at the European targets, you can still see that we are below with that and can be much more ambitious. The question is how to do it and how to pay for that. We are now going to have a discussion about the new nuclear plant again. Just take a look at the facts from the Europe last year. This is data from Agora Energiewende. It's a German consultancy. But what you can see here is that we are already building much more renewables than anything else. The pre-speakers told about the GDP to electricity correlation. That is no longer true. And if you can see, we can make it to the next crisis where probably the energy efficiency will again force the industry down towards new technologies. We can probably see some of the heavy industry being shut down in the Central Europe, which is, I'm afraid, already happening, or we are quite close to that. The car manufacturing industry is also experiencing some difficult times. And what you can see on the data from the last year, all of the standard energy power plants were kind of having difficulties operating on a daily basis during the summer heat wave. And let's face it, we are going to have more summer heat waves, and they will be deeper. And if you take a look at the nuclear power plants, well, they are good when they are old because they are cheap, but they are a huge risk as well. So if you hear comments about safety with nuclear, well, it costs more than 300 billion to build it. You get it in 30 years, In 30 years, the technology will probably be completely different than it is today. And during the summer heat wave, because of its efficiency, which is 30%, 60 or 70 goes up in the air in form of a heat, which you can't use properly. Because of the huge inefficiency, it will go out of cooling water in the summer, and you will have to shut it down, which is 2 gigawatts, which is 1/5 of the consumption of the Czech Republic. Just to do the switch off, you need to re-switch the grid in the whole Europe, just to switch one Temelín, for example. And it costs a lot, and nobody calculates it into the business case. What's the future of the regulation and the business, and what the business needs? I'll answer that now. It needs to know that the CO2 is a cost, because up to now, everyone gave no interest in CO2, because its cost was about 5 euros. You can see the reaction of one of our clients in the CO allowance trading. When 2 years ago there were some signs that the price will go up, they started panicking. There's a very, very slight growth in 1 week, and they started to obtain significant volumes of the allowance, because now the price is almost 30, and it basically means that if you were used to pay 20 euros per megawatt hour, now it's 40 or 50 just because of this. And if you are, for example, a steel industry a manufacturing company, this is the cost that will shut your power plant and your manufacturing down in the next 2 years. This is why, and this is why we need to have the stable regulation, because we had the recession, we had the economy going up for 8 years or so. You can see that the steel industry, automotive and so on, were milking the cow as possible, and the EBITDA went up, the debt went down. You would think it's a good time to invest. Well, they did not. And why? Because there was no cost in the CO2. This is the data from the American market. The European market is completely the same, and you can see already that in Britain, in Slovakia, in Czech Republic, those heavy industry clients are having significant trouble, despite the fact that the basic coking coal and iron ore commodities are going down significantly. Let's take a look into the automotive industry, because what you have in Czech Republic is the automotive industry, and it also needs the steel from one of our 2 or 3 free factories. This is the new regulation. What it basically means that in the next 2 years we will need to have average new car sold with the consumption of 4 liters gasoline per 100 kilometers, which is not possible to do without the companies selling plug-in hybrids. In the other 5 years, it will be reduced by another 15%, and by 2030 you will basically need to have 1/2 of the portfolio electric. It's even more ambitious in the buses. In the next 10 years, I think we can say for sure that all the buses in the cities, the new buses, will be electric. And what it means for energy, again, is that you will have a huge amount of power connected to the transmission and distribution grids. If you take a look at Germany, for example, it's a country of 80 million, which means they have about, I think, 45 million cars. And if you apply just 1 million of Teslas, which is not a huge number if you take a look at the perspective. And it's also a goal of the German government for 2020, which will probably not be met, but never mind that. If you have these million Teslas, it is a backup power in the batteries for Europe for 1 hour, for whole Europe. And now compare that to the scale of 10 million power plant. What's also interesting is the balancing market. Okay. It's a market of 5 billion Czech crowns, and for example, 1 unit price per megawatt hour is 500 or 600 crowns. If you consider the battery backup power, which can also provide these services, it is already somewhere around 300. It is cheaper to do that, it is more flexible, and it will be a native function of the future world in the next 3 years probably, because you will have all these cars connected to the grid. So back to what the regulation should be. It should, in the first place, not restrict the technical evolution. Because, for example, what you can see in the balancing market, in the Czech Republic, it's a huge market. There are just few sources providing these services, and it will probably be very complicated to let the accumulation of energy to join the market, as it did in, for example, United Kingdom or Germany. So back to the policy. What it should be is the opposite of energy. Energy is volatile, and the policy should be predictable. The markets are going close to real time, and the policy should reflect that. The energy is also not respecting borders. We should all just face that and harmonize our European regulation. The energy regulation is one of the best, I think, that comes from Brussels. I think we should just play the game because the business needs it. If it doesn't happen, the business will go down in the European competitiveness market. The energy is interchangeable; it changes forms. The people in the first panel talked about gas, electricity. Let's not include that into the regulation. It is technologically neutral already. Let's keep it that way on the national level, please. Don't do again the mistakes that we did in the past. And what we need is the target. I think we have it. The energy is really the underlying business and commodity under whole economy. We need it very much. I'm not sure if everyone wants to adopt their way of life and reducing the consumption. So if we need to have additional power, please, let's do it sustainable, because it's cheap, it's simple, and I think we can do it.
Thank you, Petr. Okay, last but not least, David Šafář, one of the major players, energy players on the European market perspective. David, the floor is yours.
Many thanks. Can you please switch?
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
Yeah, so welcome to everybody. I'm going to speak about basically 3 elements: about evolution, about revolution, and basically one common thing is innovation. What we see as an energy utility, and maybe you have heard that EU Commission approved our merger with Innogy, so together with RWE, we will switch our assets, and basically E.ON will focus in the future onto energy networks and customer solution, and RWE will focus on conventional generation, what we have just now seen, and big power plants, big renewables. And I'm going to describe you how we really see the future. What we see as an important part of the future are basically these 5 elements, and we can discuss them later on more in detail. There are renewables, so part of decarbonization, so-called smart grids, decentralization of the whole system, digitalization, and last but not least, smart solution. What I'm sometimes missing, and today, if you just think that through, we don't consider so often the customer at the end, so our citizens. So when you are today at home, when you just say hello to your friend, girlfriend, whoever, when you raise the question how they reflect all these changes, maybe you can get different answers. And when we are discussing that with our customers, and we will serve more than 50 million customers, there are some of them who are sensitive, who like this whole new energy world, but the majority of the customers some of them are afraid, and some of them are really price sensitive. And I think we should really consider the price of the new world of energy as an important part, because there are specific examples from the past where our customers are not happy about, and I think we should really learn from it. When we consider these renewables, and here you can see the targets, so in 2005 we were about 7%, 2018 we are about 15%, so basically we can say that we met our targets. When we are speaking of the future targets, so EU targets about 20% share in 2020, 32% in 2030. In Czech Republic, the targets are a bit lower, but we are going to really meet these targets. But frankly speaking, this was a political discussion and decision. So it was not a decision based on our voters, based on our citizens, but it was based on the political discussion and political agreements. When you consider your yearly consumption, and I like the passive house and so on, but frankly speaking, when we consider Prague, so there aren't so many passive houses and so on, so majority of our citizens live in block of flats or in another type of buildings. And when you consider their consumption of 2 to 3 megawatt hours, so for the past, every year you pay 1,600 Czech crowns. You paid for renewables. Now you can just internally think whether it's worth pay for it or not. I would say when we consider that these power plants there are rooftops, so basically they produce the electricity on the place when the electricity can be consumed, then from my perspective as an electricity provider, distribution company, I'm glad for it, because basically they can produce, they can consume directly at the place. But if you consider the fact that 80% of all these payments are going to Cyprus, to these LTDs, so basically there are green fields, and you are paying to really good investors who invested in the right time at the right place. So I'm just now then raising the question whether this was really the right decision. So I'm not trying to be pessimistic about renewables. We strongly support them. But one point you should really bring home is we should do it in Czech language. I can't translate it into English. We should really use selský rozum. It's really common sense, and to do it not from a political perspective, but really use a common sense and do the right decisions, or to make some lessons learned for the future. What we see now, we will meet the target. The positive thing about that is that we are getting more and more when we consider these renewables, more and more profitable. So basically the price decreased dramatically in the last couple of years, so the whole prices are falling. There was a decrease about 8%, and we strongly believe that this can be an important part of the energy future. But this will be not a single one part. There will be other things that we should really take into account. The solar we should really see as a rooftop installation, make these lessons learned from this greenfield era from 2008 till 2011. Concerning biomass, we see the potential in the heating sector, and wind, there is really a limited potential. It's not about the border. Of course, the border is just a border. But the main fact is that we are not able to build these wind parks, wind windmills. Based on the discussion with local authorities, you will not get the permission. So when we try to renew mid-voltage line, it will take us 2 to 3 years, but 85% of this whole time frame will take you to really go to get the permission, to really then dig a hole and light their mid-voltage cable. It's then 5%. It's the easiest way, but to get the permission, that's the way. And that, again, we should take it into account. Concerning the other technologies, biomass for transport and heating sector, the other like waste can be an option. Water, really very, very limited because it's already there. What will be in the market? And again, I'm coming back how to make really the thing happen, because we would like to really proceed with all these new technologies. We are technologically neutral, and we would like to enable to our customers that they are really willing to invest into e-mobility, into storage, into communication infrastructure. All these things will come to the market, but we should really, again, use a common sense how to really bring them to the market and ensure that we will not get into the bad situation like in the past. So in this 10 minutes time frame, last but not least, these 3 points are, I think, essential. The first one on the left, it's again the legislation. We need really a predictable legislation that is based on local needs, on local premises and so on. So not to be too political, but really be on the ground. The second part in the middle, it will take some time. So we shouldn't be really a revolutionary here in this area, because at the end customers will pay for it. Every customer will pay for all these things we are speaking here about. And that's the last point. We should really consider what we are willing to pay for this future. We are green, we will be green, but really we should again use a common sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. So, 3 perspectives, 3 takes on the subject matter, a contrasting one. I believe we will have again a very nice and respectful discussion. Before I proceed with questions that you pose, most of them during the first panel, and please do ask, because that's why we are here. I will ask you, gentlemen, on the second panel, the same question like I asked on the first panel at the very beginning, meaning, are we going to meet the fairly ambitious goals of 2050, meaning that we're going to have a emission net zero economy or world as such? Or is it something that we should strive for, but is difficult if not impossible? And I'll start with Kai, if I may.
2050 is way too late. 2050 is based on IPCC. It's a conservative global a rigorous assessment of human activity on this planet, and it does not enough take into account natural feedback loops which are rapidly kicking into place. We will realize in the next few years that 2050 is not enough, and I urgently warn us and business to prepare. Okay? So even if the European Union reaches 2050, there's absolutely nothing gained, because the entire world needs to gain 2050. So if we are the most developed part of the world, and we actually created this situation, as we did, then we need to lead by example. We need to get down, as we say, by 2025. That's not possible with thinking as usual. It's just unthinkable. How could we do that? It's 5 years left. But think 1938. 1938, a lot of people were thinking, Hitler's not going to be so bad. This is somehow going to work out. 2 years later, they were transforming their economies like crazy in order to win that war. That's what we need. We have a shared enemy. It is our global economic system, which we need to transform into a sustainable one. So 2050 is not enough, and we will definitely have to reach it, because the alternative is unthinkable.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, so basically we are striving to go for this direction. Again, for me, that's the question of money. We are really willing to pay for it because it will cost some money. We try to really look for cost optimal solutions. The positive effect is that the technologies are getting cheaper and cheaper on one side. On the other hand, the labor costs are increasing steadily. So basically, I agree with Arne that we should go into this direction, but it will of course cost some money, some human effort, a huge human effort.
Peter, what's the way your clients usually approach this thing? I will sort of tweak the question. Are they already thinking within the framework of something's happening and we're going to have to, or we should react, or is it still sort of a wishful thinking on behalf of those that actually consider it an issue, a pressing issue?
Yeah, I think they are since last year. When the EU ETS went back to normal pricing. Because, for example, if you take a look at the central heating systems, there are small power plants which are basically calculating the next month in terms of cash and considering closing the plant because of the EU ETS price, because they didn't prepare for that. Everyone expected the system will be non-functional for the next years and the European Commission will seize it. Well, surprise, surprise, it did not happen. And suddenly all of them are considering bankruptcy. Not all of them. But, you know, there's a cost and there's also something extra which comes from competitiveness. I think we have to see this part of the coin because for example, let's take a look at the automotive and steel industry again. VW is now considering buying only carbon neutral steel. Well, we in Czech Republic did not invest into the new business and carbon neutral steel making, and now VW is not going to buy the Czech steel. Well, we should have expected that.
Thank you.
Could I comment just in, because you said VW.
Briefly, please.
Very briefly, and to that point, actually Škoda Auto, and a lot of people don't know that, they have put in place this year policy to go carbon neutral by 2025. You know, so they are aggressively meeting the demand that we demand as an Extinction Rebellion. And because they are so important, I expect that others will follow.
Can you maybe elaborate a bit more on that? I mean, what does it mean for a company like this, an automotive company, yes, which by definition or up until now meant definitely not carbon neutral, to forgo or go for something like this?
Well, first of all, it's a little bit more easy. It's easier for a manufacturing company like Škoda Auto to go carbon neutral than, for example, a steel producer. You know, like Čínecké železárny, they have a much harder job to do, and they will expect, you know, public funding support from the country, and they need it. You know, the main reason behind the automotive industry decision is it doesn't make sense to sell electromobiles which you've produced with fossil fuels. It just doesn't make sense. You know, people are laughing their heads off, and they know that. And the moment actually they manage to produce the cars close or or in carbon neutral mode, they are extremely attractive to the market because the market is waking up to the problem we're having. In the next few years, I expect the forest in the Czech Republic to die out. You know, right now we're losing about 50% of our monoculture, you know, of smrkový les. So people will respond to that, the market will respond to that, and they will want to hear that the business is actually leading the way, because otherwise they will blame business, and there's no money to be made if the business gets blamed, you know. And actually, in the case of Škoda Auto, if people stop buying cars, you know, they immediately have layoffs. They only produce on demand, you know, they don't stock cars.
Thank you. David, Petr, maybe Arne, what kind of improved legislation do you propose there needs to be in smart grid infrastructure in order to support more RES and higher EV use in the Czech Republic? What would help? Or, you know, you've talked about the negative externalities, if you will. On the other hand, we can't probably, as Petr already mentioned in his presentation, We can't probably just let the market work its magic, because historically it doesn't work that way. You need some sort of incentives. So from your perspective, and then from yours, Peter and Kai again, what should be or could be done?
Yeah, so basically we are at the end of this regulatory period, and the fifth regulatory period will start from 2021, and we really need a serious discussion with state authorities. What are the expectations concerning the development of all these new technologies or elements like e-mobility, like renewables, like smart metering and so on, to really discuss all these things in detail without any political background, and really calculate all the impacts, because we can, based on the numbers that we can see, we can then predict or calculate the investment that the electricity grid will need. And if you imagine the situation with, for example, middle voltage or high voltage cables or overhead lines, these assets are in the grid basically 40, 50, 60, 70 years. So basically when we know now that the e-mobility will come in 2040, we should renew the grid now to be really ready for it, because it doesn't make sense to do it now and then later on in 10 years again, because again it will increase the cost that the end customer will have to pay.
Thank you. Peter, if the Ministry of Trade and Industry or the Prime Minister comes to EY and asks for a magical formula, one piece of legislation that will not change everything but will help, what would it be? What would you advise?
Well, I think...
Easy question, of course.
Very, very easy one. But I think that really in the energy regulation, just rewrite what comes from the Brussels, don't do anything extra, and it will be fine. Because what we did in the next decade, the solar boom, the cost system, the regulation, our new Energy Act, which is being delayed again and again and again, the renewable sources support delayed again. That's not good for the business. That's not good for the environment. So let's do it simple, quick, and technologically neutral.
Now you, of course, made Radoš very happy. Kai.
What I would like is not necessarily new legislation, new regulation. I want a massive information campaign. We've been exposed in this country to a massive information campaign heading in the other direction for decades. You know, this is the what we've inherited from former President Klaus, who denied climate science all over the world, has been quoted all over the world. It's still in our heads. You know, it's still in our heads, and unfortunately it's a lie. If our Prime Minister and our Minister of Environment has been claiming we're meeting all the targets at the UN last week, that's a lie. We're not meeting all the targets. You know, it's the thing to say to be popular. I understand that. That's what politicians do. But it's not going to help us in the long run. We're in a really difficult situation. We need to get our act together. We need a massive information campaign so people wake up, and so people actually stop buying fossil fuel-based cars. You know, it's a ridiculous situation that our largest employer and largest car manufacturer in this world is vamping up production capacities to build up to 100,000 electric vehicles in the next few years, while this country at this moment has about 1,000 electric vehicles in operation. It's ridiculous, really is, you know. And they are sweating in Mladá Boleslav. And they were actually, Mr. Meyer went to see the Prime Minister and said, we really need your help. And he said, you know, sorry, I'm not going to help you. You know, maybe we'll build a few charging stations. You know, but we really need that signal. Maybe that's the regulation that we need. You know, we'll give everyone 150,000 crowns if he buys an electric vehicle. You know, Shrotovna. You know, it works. It works. It has worked in other countries. Just to support that market and that transition, which is immense. That transition, if we just leave it up to business without support, is really tough. At the same time, we got the technology, we got the money in the world. What's missing is political will. It's our conviction, understanding what the problem is, and then doing the right steps in that direction. That's really missing.
There's a question that might be considered sort of a follow-up. how to actually promote or how to have more electric cars on the streets in the Czech Republic or on the roads in the Czech Republic, since they're expensive, and of course it's difficult to charge them because there are not enough charging stations and stuff like that. So you're saying some sort of a governmental support, Šrotovné-like.
If I can answer to that, I've been an almost exclusive user of electric vehicles since January when I sold my other car. I didn't buy a new electric vehicle, I use shared vehicles. There's about 60 e-Golfs in Prague, they're just standing around. I didn't have to invest anything. It's like those electric rollers, you know. It really works, and there's enough charging stations right now, and they will not build more 4,000 electrical vehicles. So just try it out. Once you've actually driven, who of you has driven in an electric car? You know, it's actually delightful. It's like a mixer, you know. And you get used to just thinking of the charging. It's absolutely possible. You know, we've driven the electric car to Italy. Yes, it was a 15-hour trip instead of a 9-hour trip, but it was really fun. You know, my son was navigating us always to the next charging station. You know, 200 years ago we had to water our horse. You know, now we have to charge the battery. You know, and you actually see something else than just the highways.
That's of course, and we're coming back to what David said. Some people like that and enjoy that, and maybe even prefer that. Some don't. David, just out of curiosity, your take on electric vehicles and their future.
So I'm driving a hybrid. That's positive. Just by fun, our car policy is really very strict. So basically, the time like 2004, where we were able to drive Audi A6 3.0 is gone. So basically, just now, we as E.ON see really the future in these hybrid or e-cars, and I'm quite satisfied with my hybrid. Today I have visited, it was called Day of Clean Mobility, where we discussed with different ministries their position, their support for clean mobility. I think this so-called Šrotovné can be one option, but there can be some financial or non-financial really support initiatives that can really support really strongly the potential buyers to really buy the e-cars. From our energy networks perspective, we try to really predict the weak spots, so how to really reinforce our grid to be able to connect the customers, because we expect that the customer is not willing to wait for the connection for 2 years, but he would like to get it really shortly. So we try to really identify the weak spots to be ready when the customer will come to us, just to connect him with the wall box or with chargers. As you have mentioned, the Škoda Auto or the other car producers, I think the positive effect is that the e-cars are quite nice. I have driven today the Mercedes-Benz, the EOC, really nice car, so it's really getting more and more sexy product that can be again attractive for some customer. Of course, the price of the e-cars is still a bit higher in comparison with a classic one, but I think this will happen. This will change in the coming years as well.
A follow-up question, if I may. So, to what extent do you think we can let the market forces, if you will, and changing attitudes within the society, within the consumer base, to work its magic, and to what extent we need some sort of a regulation or incentive push?
So basically, I am very glad that on the national level we are currently implementing or evaluating the implementation of this so-called National Action Plan for Clean Mobility, because there are all the major or key players who are on the Czech market, and of course there is a necessary support from all these different ministries, because the legislation is needed, and some changes in the legislation will be needed, and that's, I think, the good way how we can do it together, because there are counterparts from car industry, from utilities, from ministries, from already different counterparts who can really play an important role in this future energy world. Because when you see the situation in Norway, where they have a huge amount of e-cars, but without infrastructure. That's again the point where we shouldn't be in the future. So it should be balanced. So when you have a car, you need charging station, you need some sexy product, and so on. So it should be really the whole chain.
Petr, may I ask for your opinion or take on subject matter?
Yep. If you remember my first slide with the light bulb, there was the Edison one, and there was the ugly something with heavy metals inside and something that we don't want to use anymore, and that was the LED light. It was 10 years. 10 years back, we didn't know the LED lights will be such success. We don't know it now about the electric cars. We may not see the future now. The cars that we have today are heavy. The batteries can last 500 miles. Well, who knows whether it will be good in 10 years for the customers. But we have a technologically neutral regulation. We want to have some, we have the volume of savings that we want to reach, and we have a trading system for that. So I think we will be fine with that, and now we can let the business do its job.
A question that already was posed to the panelists on the first panel, but let me hear you from you, your thoughts on the subject matter. How can the world achieve zero net carbon emissions when it seems like the EU is rowing alone against the tide, maintained mainly by China, the US and the OPEC countries more generally? Most of the big economies are essentially less ambitious, let me be politically correct on this one, than Europe. And a lot of people just say, well, then why should we do something, since in total it seems like it doesn't make much sense. And we're, as a result, losing something. Or that's the notion shared by many people. I'll ask all three of you. You have the right, since you have the mic, Guy.
Well, the easy answer is through rebellion. I'm really serious on that. You know, there's no way we can make this transformation work in that short period of time by doing business as usual. Regulation will not change people's behavior fast enough. We need to first change people's behavior by having people understand rebelling against the system. Once, we don't need to convince 50% of the Czech population that this is necessary. Actually, around 10%, of people who really want change will be enough. And there's one slide I didn't show, but it's fascinating. In England, 2 years ago, about 5% of the population thought that the environment was the most important topic. Now it's up in the 60s. It's more important than Brexit, actually. People are waking up. They got 100,000 people organized in the rebellion in England within the last 10 months. And this is coming. It's coming like a steam engine towards us, and we need to prepare for that. So this is paradigm change. It's not dynamic change. We're all used to dynamic change. So if we achieve paradigm change, then it's like a metal flopping to the other side. And I want us to be prepared for that, because there's going to be huge challenges to ramp up to that new system. When suddenly everyone wants sustainable stuff, and stops buying the stuff that we usually buy and then waste, there's huge challenges for business. A lot of companies will go, because they don't sell their products. And other companies suddenly will go like that, and we need to work together to make that transition.
Before I let David and Petr tackle this issue, this question, maybe a follow-up to you, Arne, and it goes along one of the questions we got from the audience. Can you imagine the paradigm shift, if you're saying it's a must, without, quote-unquote, blood on the street? Meaning, sometimes for a paradigm shift, you just need the word to shake. Can we actually change people's minds, their attitudes, their preferences, without something significant happening?
Yes and no. I think there will be people killed in that rebellion, but they will not be killed because of their actions, but because some people will respond violently. On the other hand, right now in the Czech Republic last year, 7,000 people died because of our economic system, because of pollution. Globally, something like 400,000 people, and the estimation also go up to 3 million people have died because of our economic system. So if I, drastically try to compare the numbers, then I would go for rebellion, because it's a peaceful rebellion, which actually is about, working together, about solidarity, about love. It sounds funny to be at the economic university and talk about love, but it's really what we need in the future, compassion and love. It's not profit. Profit has brought us to this point. And it's perfectly okay to talk about profit in this room, but to talk about love is somewhat, rebellious. So, yes, there will be deaths, unfortunately, I'm afraid.
Thank you for that. David, back to square one, meaning the question of Europe versus the rest of the world and the possible futility of all these activities, lofty goals and stuff like that.
So just now I'm having in mind all the different ideas based on the discussion here. Basically, whether the rebellion is or no is the right way, I'm not really able to judge. I think we should really try to evaluate all these things from this perspective, without personal ambitions, without any political ambitions, and try to really find the best option. I know that's sometimes really very hard, but when I see what we are just now doing with this merger with Innogy, we decided really to go for this way, because we strongly believe that really the combination of energy networks as a backbone, because the electricity will be really an essential, and still will be an essential component of our lives in the future. And together with customer solutions, this can be a really good complementary solution to really fulfill our customers' needs. So save money, save nature, that's an integral part of our future strategy that we would like to follow. And I think, yeah.
Thank you. Petr.
Yeah, well, once again, and first of all, I don't think that customers will want to change their behavior. They will not want to save electricity. They will want to have more comfort. Back again, you would not want to use the old light bulb. You want to have the modern one. If you drive electric car, you want it to go further maybe, which it probably will in the next few years, but you don't want to go back to the fossil car. So I think that the business models will be very simple, but they will enhance our experience of the services that we receive. For example, with the light bulb again, Norway is now able to have much more light and not sleep by 5 o'clock in the summer, and the Spain is saving electricity. We are all having much more comfort. And that was the phase of the ugly light bulb, which was expensive, very expensive. It didn't last for long, but I think that's a temporary phase, again, with the cars, with the smart grids, and with all the energy business models that we are having right now.
David, there was one question I accidentally erased it, so if there's the author of that question and I go off the track, please correct me. But there was a question regarding the windmills, and the question was, it was essentially a follow-up or an idea that was stemming from your presentation. The question was, is it really valid to say there is no potential or there is limited potential just because it takes some time to get the permits and then to build it, and there was one more argument which I forgot.
So basically, the point is, from our perspective, the potential is somehow defined by some technical key facts. So basically, you as an investor, you would consider whether to build up a windmill here or in other European countries, because you can make quite easy measurement. You can very easily predict how the wind will flow during the year, and of course you will need it for your investment decision. We see the offshore wind, what we have just now have in the future, the RWE will get our offshore wind parks, and there we see the higher potential. On the other hand, the technologies are getting cheaper and cheaper. Just now, we have started with a startup company who is preparing small windmills for SME or for bigger customers. But in comparison with these really big windmills, this is the windmill that is maybe 10, 12 meters high. So it's not typical the highest one that can be usable for SMEs, and the efficiency can be better. So basically, if you then in the future reflect the local conditions with the lower cost for the technologies, you can get interesting results. And just another example, there was a topic regarding batteries. When my people came to my office in 2014 with a proposal to build up a battery storage unit of the size of 1 megawatt, my reaction in the first hand was really, you are crazy, because to really build up a container. 1.5 years later, they came again, and the price decrease was about 30%. And at the end of 2017 or 18, we opened up our first battery storage in the south part of Bohemia, just to really present to the market that we are able to do it. We are ready to implement it into our electricity network. The set point is that, as Peter has already mentioned, the new or almost new or modernized or whatever energy law isn't still here, and we are discussing about that for 5-6 years, and the new one will come maybe 2023 and so on. Our customers who are just now willing to invest into batteries are ready to come to us, but we have to say them, we are ready to connect you, but there is no legislation. We are not able to guarantee you whatever. It's your decision, but we are not able, based on the legislation. We have done whatever was possible, but still it was not enough. So again, technology is ready, customers wants to have it, and we are not able to do that in Czech Republic. Sorry.
One more question from the audience, and then the rest will be up to one-on-ones during the glass of wine part of this conference. The one from the audience, and then I will have the last comment, or rather last question for you. How can we get higher public investment in grid infrastructure, or maybe more generally, where it should and could go within the subject matter, within the theme we're actually discussing, of course. Arne, you have the mic again, so I'll go with you.
I'd rather pass it on. I'm not a specialist on grid infrastructure.
Okay, let's go for David, of course, and then Petr might actually chip in as well.
I think you should go first.
I just didn't want you to overheat, because you were just answering a couple of questions in a row. So I tried to diversify.
It's a really interesting question. I'm just now thinking the different ways how to really answer it, but basically it's again about the from my opinion about the perspectives, about the long term, and I like the word sustainability, because that's in your terms, because we are at the Faculty of Economy. From your perspective, you can really describe it with financial figures. Arne is describing this sustainability with love, with all the different aspects about passion and so on. For me, really, sustainability is the key fact that we should reflect with when we think that through.
Thank you, and I think you actually came back, the sort of a first, we just did the full circle, because sustainability is something that Hans-Jochen was addressing in his very first presentation of the day. So as you can see, even though it might seem fragmented to you, there is a certain underlying logic into what we're talking about. Petr, you want to add something to what David just said? You don't have to.
Yeah, well, I think David has very complicated years ahead of him, because the grid will need to be reconstructed again, and I think the sustainability in the economical sense is important, because you will pay for it, probably, And if I would ask you, do you know how much you pay for your electricity on your yearly bill? You don't, so it's cheap. But what we have to build for the electric car infrastructure and so on will be very expensive, and we need to carefully think whether we over-invest into the capacity or we drive the electricity better, because it will be more volatile, as I said. We will not have the large power plants. They will be decentralized and small, probably, and the energy steering might be the better option. But, you know, finding the balance, finding the sustainability, it's really the key question to do.
Sorry. Sure.
One more example, just bring it home and think that through. Very nice topic, smart metering. When I started in 2008, my first project was in Germany and to do a rollout of smart metering for SME customers. I spent some time in Sweden, and when I came to my flat, the lady told me whether I know what is there on the wall, and I just said, it's meter. And she told me, yeah, it's the meter, that's true. But she explained me how the meter can help to nature, how it can measure different parameters, and the story was really about passion, about love, about really interest in it. When I brought that to Germany and we calculated from an investor perspective the profitability, and of course here we are better in all these different calculations, the situation from an investor's perspective was totally different. And as you may know, in Germany they decided to go for another option. So basically they are rolling smart meters, but they are doing it in a different way and not following fully the EU regulation. It's quite funny. The third perspective is again Czech Republic. In Czech Republic, nobody is interested in smart metering. Nobody is interested about some of these different elements. And what we need to do, again, use a common sense, and we are trying just to identify the benefits for us as for an electricity company, for energy networks. So to really find some profitable business case for us, how can we use the data? It's quite really tough to really get the right data that we can use that is more profitable in comparison with other solutions. And concerning customers, our supervisory board told us once that we should bring a smart metering product onto the Czech market. We are placed in different countries, and there was really just to make some gaming out of that. And who will be the first? Who will bring some sexy smart metering product onto the market? The guy will get, I think, a bottle of champagne, of really good champagne. And after 5 years, so there isn't any winner so far. So, and we will serve 50 million customers, and so the interest of customers is really low. One guy from UK, and UK is a very advanced market, came to this meeting and brought this, they call it in-home display, and because it was according to the law to bring the in-home display to the customers and so on, and he came with the conclusion that it's quite funny that when the customer will get the in-home display without batteries, he is not willing to really invest into batteries, into these 3 small AA batteries, because after 2 weeks, yeah, you can see your consumption, but yeah, now what can I see there? That my wife is preparing something to eat, or it's fine, but after 2 weeks, you are interested in other things, really. So again, really use, and I am saying that always, make some really common sense and be really realistic in these ways.
Okay. Is there a comment, a question?
Well, I think it's not about common sense, maybe it's more about the really well-designed decision process, because common sense took us to the solar boom. It was a common sense decision. We do no measurement and evaluation of the policy. And that was the common sense in the 2009, 10 and 11. There were companies like you who had no idea how many connection requests you had. And at the moment you realized there is 9 gigawatts of requests, and then you started freaking out because you had not prepared for this implementation. nor did the state. Okay? But all this common sense, we will do it somehow without making a really good and well-designed thinking about the complex issue of energy is the problem. Moreover, we are here talking about electricity, which is 20% of energy consumption. What about the rest of the energy consumption? What about the 80% which is used in households, industry, and transport?
Yeah, we tackle that to an extent on the first panel. Thank you for your comment, David. As far as I can tell, you would probably like to answer, but because we're almost out of time, and because I think that we would start playing ping pong to an extent, let's stop almost right here. My last question, and again, I'm going to misuse my position as an advisor to people who want to invest wisely. I will ask you, gentlemen, which issue or which technology in particular do you think will actually, within the realm of energy sector, will be or become big here in the Czech Republic? Where would you place your own money? David.
So I would go for batteries.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really hard when it takes your money. I think batteries and solar, even though we don't have the best solar conditions in the world, but I think it will be interesting.
Thank you. That's just for you, sort of a food for thought, or maybe a jump starter of one-on-one conversations that can happen.
Roman, I have
Yes.
one comment, so I say something at the end. I want us to invest in humans.
In humans. Is there an ETF for it? Some sort of investment vehicle?
Well, I think if we really start to come around and understand what is at stake, you know, there'll be many business opportunities for growth where we really need it, you know. So let's stop funding fossil fuels and start funding the new market.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all. Kai Arn Springerum, CEO of HE Consulting, Petr Řeháček of Advisory Services at EY Czechia, and last but not least, David Šafář, Head of Grid Management and Strategic Projects, E.ON. Let me just briefly summarize, and I'll try it. I was scribbling while listening to very interesting panel. What we just covered, we are in the midst of a transition, that's for sure, and transitions historically are messy, so get ready, you will get dirty, maybe literally. There is no silver bullet, there is no magical formula that will get us there, meaning to a more stable situation, if you will. However, there are good practices already and examples to follow. For instance, Ed mentioned a couple of interesting case studies from Britain. Best practices are often supported, but they're not conditioned by regulation and institutions. For instance, free market can do something, but not everything that we need. Yet, market can and should play a role. And again, Ed mentioned a couple of instances where it's at least interesting to follow what has happened and what is happening at the moment. But on the other hand, as David mentioned in his presentation and subsequent discussion, one should also mind externalities, negative externalities that come with regulation and other, let's say, interventions from the structures, be it supranational or national. Last but not least, and that's me encouraging you to do something, we need something to be done. Let's try to do it. Whatever you think is the right thing to do, go for it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Thank you for actually staying until the very end of this very interesting presentation or conference as such. And now, 7 o'clock, I think we're there. The glass of wine or glasses of wine are ready. I'm just gonna make the use of cheat sheet. Where are we having the glass of wine? Jaro, please. Right next door, excellent, so you know your way. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you for coming. Enjoy your evening. Have a great day, great evening. Goodbye.